Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for August 23rd, 2018. Joining us on the line to start the show today, Travis Clark for our annual college soccer preview. Good morning, Travis.
Good morning, guys. What's this, like the 7th year in a row we've done it?
I think so.
Travis, I think you and I probably go back a decade, but for you, Kevin, myself, and you, it's been a while, and I don't want to make anyone feel old by saying that, at least all myself. So yeah, it's been a few years since I've been in college, needless to say. So let's start with a real general one here. Let's give me some do they still write for the For Dummies books like NCAA Soccer for Dummies? Can you give me a little outline on who exactly the big players are on both the men's and women's side this year?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, you can start with Stanford because they're big players on both sides. They won, Stanford women's and men's program won the 2017 title respectively. So I think if you want to look at them from just a contention perspective for the upcoming season, the women are shoo-in to be thereabouts. The men, their system team built around Jeremy Gunn's ability to demand the most out of his players, put the right guys at the right spots at the right time, and defend like animals during the postseason. So you would think that they could make their way back there again, but unlike the women, the Stanford men face significant roster turnover where, you basically ripped out the entire spine, starting goalkeeper, starting center back, starting central midfielders, and then you're starting forward, the Pac-12 Player of the Year, Foster Langsdorff. So I think that for the men's side, you probably have a little bit more opening. I know I'm jumping back and forth here, so if you have any clarity, just feel free to nudge me in either direction. But on the women's side, ESPN did a great piece that kind of sums up women's college soccer, saying it's like La Liga. Well, if La Liga was a 300-team league, of course. But because you have Stanford and UCLA women, and obviously UCLA women have a significant Canadian interest, Jessie Fleming as their star. I'm sure people in Canada have heard of her, right? But I think it could come down to Stanford and UCLA on the women's side. Then things on the men's side could be a bit more open. You're looking at someone like North Carolina, also Canadian interest there. One of their starting defenders, Alex Comcia, comes from the Vancouver Whitecaps Academy. So that is one of the teams I would expect on the men's side to emerge, but things are a little bit more fluid and open because not only do you have the usual turnover from seniors leaving, but early leavers, kids signing pro early, whether it's through the Generation Adidas mechanism or the homegrown mechanism. So, you have programs like Akron, Wake Forest, that should be thereabouts, Indiana, but they have a lot of questions to answer before they've kicked a ball. So, we've seen the women open the season last weekend, and Stanford crushed their opponents. UCLA won in close fashion, but I think that going back to the women's side, if you're going to have to throw in a couple more contenders, you could look at in North Carolina potentially putting it together. Virginia looks pretty decent. I think that's probably a good point to leave it. Duke's got a lot of turnover to handle on the women's side of things too. So they were one of the College Cup teams a year ago. Same with South Carolina. Could be good, but it's too early to know.
One of the things I'm curious, Travis, in a general sense, is where this sport is fitting in on NCAA campuses. Obviously, football, college football, is king on a lot of campuses. College basketball, both men's and women's side, gets a lot of attention in the States. So those are kind of held above, and then you have your little pockets here and there. Hockey's big in certain parts. Whatever is big in certain parts. Where does it fit in general within the mind of an NCAA fan, college soccer now?
I think a general fan, this is pretty depressing to say, but it's almost like general fans of college soccer probably don't exist, right? You're either a fan of a specific school, and if you have a good soccer program and follow it, then you probably get a good attendance. You can look at a Maryland, Creighton, who else is out there? There's a couple other programs that'll come to my mind, but I think that you can classify fans, even fans of North American soccer, you're probably not paying attention to college soccer because there's minimal star. Most of the impact players now are coming from Europe, and obviously there are plenty of exceptions here and there, but I don't even know if you're maybe let's take a random, like a Sporting KC fan. Is a Sporting KC, like even a diehard fan, like tracking your academy players as they're going to colleges, which are hard to follow to begin with. So I know that Wake Forest gets good crowds of 4,000 to 5,000, which packs their stadium for the men's side in the ACC. But it's so scattershot and hard to like speak generally to that is almost like saying there's not really a quote unquote general NCAA soccer fan as far as I know of. Maybe I'm wrong.
One question that I wanted to ask you, Travis, we have seen in the last few months in the off season, one famous program deciding to shut down, and there's been a lot of blowback. I'm talking about University of New Mexico with alumni like Blake Smith, former Montreal Impact player, FC Cincinnati. What is the feeling right now with a program that does have a history of producing professional players, of having success, deciding to turn the key and shut the door? What is the reaction of that decision?
Well, you can't also forget the Montreal Impact current goalkeeper, Jason Beaulieu. Sorry if I mangled his name.
Jason Beaulieu, you're right. Just like 2
signed
years
as
ago.
a homegrown player. But I honestly don't know what the latest is on the situation. I know that they obviously shed a lot of players, and I mean, it bums me out to say, but everything I read and have heard seems that it's kind of an open and shut case. I know that because of the program's prestige, to an extent, there could be some pushback because they're able to bring in money that other programs that aren't on the chopping block aren't. I think that's probably the only way that it gets saved, honestly, because it seems like, unfortunately, the athletic department has issues that are sort of out of the control of the men's soccer program, whether that's losing significant amount of money. They're competing in the Conference USA, which is ridiculous because, they're in New Mexico and a lot of the schools they faced are, in the southeast corner of the United States. So, they're making trips to places like Charlotte, Florida International. And, imagine how much money non-revenue sports already cost. And then you add on to that, even a longer plane flight, probably more hotel room stays. And I don't know the ins and outs of everything. I'm not on the ground there, so I can't truly speak to it. But everything that I see and read, I haven't read anything that seems to indicate they've had a change of heart or mind. So, fingers crossed for them, and hopefully we see a different outcome at the end of the college season. But it is a little bit of it's a sad storyline for the men's D1 season that starts tomorrow.
And the other thing related to this aspect for me is it symptomatic or is it a one-off? Is there other colleges that are in dire strait in certain sports program? Of course, when we talk about American football generating a lot of money, it's insane amount of money, and they have to spend those money on the program. So you have like Alabama with a $1 billion training facility that has like 10 different pools, and it's like insane. What is it?
Oh yeah, it's
what
crazy and ridiculous.
Oh no, it's opulent, and it's almost insulting to the rest of the other programs. But what is I don't want to say solution, but what can soccer do to maybe make sure that we don't have too many University of New Mexico?
Yeah, so I know that because of the sort of complicated and moving parts of college sports, it's really difficult to pin down and say, well, this program is in dire straits and this is it. I think there are a lot of things going on at New Mexico, whether it's financially related and also Title IX related. Title IX being the U.S. law that necessitates a certain amount of funding be balanced, I think, towards a certain amount of scholarship funding be spent on men's and women's sports. And I think they have issues with the football program not bringing out as much money as they always seem to project. So it's a significant checklist of issues they face. And I don't know if there are programs in similar situations. I don't know if soccer can do enough, because I found someone posted online the sort of a table of spending that D1 sports by per sport spending, I guess, and I believe the most for women's was like $4 to $5 million by an SEC school and an ACC school, respectively, and you just look at that and think that it's staggering. So if you are a program like that, what are you going to cut? What are you going to? How are you going to reduce costs? I don't know if soccer itself can necessarily do anything except try, play entertaining soccer. Don't just hoof the ball down the field, and try to build yourself within the community as much support as you can. I know that a lot of programs don't even charge admission to go to soccer games, and but I was parsing through a box score, and I forget the program, but 97 people, like the box score of a women's D1 game last weekend had 97 people showing up. I don't remember where it was. I don't remember the circumstances. If it's pouring down rain, I doubt you're going to get many people out. But you think about stuff like that, and you think about soccer's position in the country. You're kind of at the mercy of the revenue sports, living in this bubble of television money. And I think that it would be very interesting to see if that bubble comes crashing down, the repercussions at the collegiate athletic level. But those are like big philosophical discussions you could have elsewhere. I think we're getting kind of too much of a tangent, right?
Well, Travis, we might as well continue down the philosophical bent for here. You and I have been having the same conversation for almost a decade now in terms of the position of where college soccer fits within the professional landscape, how it fits in the development landscape. And I'm increasingly coming to the conclusion that this discussion is ending, that we've kind of figured it out. Is this still something that we need to sort out? Or have we kind of found a level that we're probably going to stay at for a while in terms of the position this has in development?
Yeah, I do think that I don't want to say it's leveled out. I still think there's an evolution to be had, especially with the issues that Major League Soccer teams are having now with players basically leaving for free when they turn 18, or for certain players even before that, where it's a feeding frenzy for European clubs to come in and scout talent. And if if I aspire to be a professional soccer player in North America, my first glance, I guess, would be towards the European market, right? Especially if you can go for free. And I don't know what the movement is like for Canadian kids going to England or other parts of Europe, but I know that it's increasingly becoming an option and the sort of the first choice of many players to even just join a U19 team as an 18-year-old and kind of roll the dice that way rather than, go the MLS route or go the USL route or what have you. Obviously, Toronto FC has placed significant amount of emphasis on its USL team, and I think that's a good thing, and I think that's a role it should continue to play. But I still think that for the kids that really want that college experience, it's always going to be there and not going to go away, even if it's not your main conduit of becoming a professional. So my issue is that I just wish that the MLS folks, the higher ups, the suits there, would just let it go, let the draft go, let it die, or maybe reconfigure it so that you don't have to send all 20 plus teams to one location where they're just going to sit around, twiddle their thumbs, and pick players that an agent told them to pick, or one that they scouted at 3-day, playing 3 games in 5 days, but rather just let it become something else, like kind of evolve it maybe to more towards like an MLB draft or an NHL draft situation where it's not. I don't even know the NHL draft, but
up here, it's very much like the NFL draft up here in terms of the coverage. But yeah,
okay.
I know what you're saying.
So maybe that's definitely a bad example. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's something that doesn't need to be what it is, because I haven't crunched numbers in terms of players getting minutes, but I'm sure you can count on one hand, or maybe just two, the number of first-year draftees that are actually getting some run in MLS. Obviously USL is there and is serving a purpose for some teams, but I still think that while the conversation that we've had previously is evolving, or maybe not be evolving as much, there's still elements of the development conversation you can have that like I see all these MLS officials going on record with publications talking about this, quote unquote issue they're having, but I'm like, MLS has the influence over U.S. Soccer Federation. I know things are different in Canada. You had the Alphonso Davies transfer where they're paying solidarity payments, and while I'm not saying that's what should happen here necessarily, it's like, guys, you do realize that MLS basically controls the federation. So if you want something done, you got to actually get your act together and figure it out. So the sort of, I guess that's what happens though when you have a marketing team running a soccer league. So I'll kind of leave it at that. I know I'm spraying out opinions all over the place, but that's what I'm here for, right?
Yeah, well, precisely. That's why we keep having you on. Travis, real quick, I'm going to just comment on that, then I'll ask you my next question. I think my increasingly frustration with the MLS draft, the college draft, isn't necessarily they're picking college players. It's that I think it's unfair to the players because the return on it, and I've done the numbers year after year after year now, it's just not there. Yeah. It's just not there. And to bring those kids up and to put them in front of the...
Exactly,
you're setting them up to a false expectation. Give the...
Right, yeah.
This is my solution is because everything's got to be controlled in MLS, as we know. So put a rookie salary cap in there, give them X amount of money to spend on these players. They can be exempt from the rest of the cap. It's going to be a modest amount. These players are going to get a minimum salary, and that's how you do it. And exceptional players, well, you figured that out. You can spend your whole money rather than bring a bunch in. Anyway, that's how I do it.
Right, or like baseball. That's what I'm saying. Like you get money per picks or whatever, and then you don't throw them all into the same room. You just have them on TV and maybe bring a couple of surefire picks and you do it quickly and maybe you just stream it on MLSsoccer.com. Boom, call it a day. We're done. So I think that's the part that rubs me the wrong way is the whole bonanza about it, where you're trying to get media coverage off of players that don't even matter in your media market for the most part, right? So then what's the point of it all? And it's an unnecessary expense. Blah blah whatever. I could rattle on about that for a while.
All right, speaking of star power, though, I'm going to go back to the women's side and ask specifically before we won't ask you in general about the Canadian players right now because the most famous Canadian player in the NCAA right now is on the female side, and it is, of course, Jessie Fleming, who you've already mentioned. Does she have the chance to be the best player in the entire NCAA anytime soon, or is there competition for that role for her?
So, in my opinion, is that she is. Obviously, I think it's between her and maybe Tierna Davidson, a Stanford midfielder defender, or Katarina Macario, another Stanford player, honestly enough. But her sheer ability to read the game and make decisions, and it's just, I would say that from that perspective, she is easily the best player. Just in terms of. But I think too, she's also in a situation where her talents and traits can stand out. So. I was thinking about this last night where, Mal Pugh, obviously they were teammates for a couple of days at UCLA, the U.S. forward that decided to forego her eligibility. And sure, she's being well compensated and making, $300 to $400K. And that's kind of money that's not available to somebody like Jessie if she were to turn pro. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm assuming, but I don't think she could have that same kind of opportunity financially. So that's why for her, college makes the most sense. This is Jessie. But Mal Pugh's on a team that has, I think, won 1 or 2 games this season, hasn't scored a goal in like 12 games. And you just think about that in the context of development. Like, she really wouldn't be as far off if she was dominating NCAA. Even if she had played for a season or two with Jessie Fleming, I think that would have probably helped Mallory just as much if she had stayed at school as opposed to playing, jumping into the professional environment right away. So I think that, like the sort of best player discussions, those are things that are hard to pin down necessarily, but for me, she's probably the best on the women's side.
Now, Travis, looking at other Canadians in the NCAA, can you give us a few names that has the potential to stand out in 2018-19?
So on the women's side, there is a handful of players, coming through every year, and a lot of that you don't see until the games hit. You kind of got to speculate when it's some of the freshmen. Deanne Rose is somebody that may be familiar. She's had a couple of calls. I think she played in the 2016 Olympics. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think so. Yeah.
She had
she's a full Canadian women's national. Yeah.
Yeah. So she had a pretty strong freshman season. I think a lot more will be expected of her during this upcoming season for Florida, which. I think is a little bit of a sneaky title contender, especially if Rose can still be effective. She's in that mode of like, well, is she just an athlete playing soccer? Or is she enough of the soccer piece to really kind of excel and stand out? West Virginia, even without Ashley Lawrence and Ketisha Buchanan no longer there. Well, obviously they weren't there last year either, but Riley Foster's in goal for them. Bianca St. George at St. George, Esther Mai Keith. There are a handful of Canadians still in Morgantown. Texas has actually added a couple of players. Julia Grosso is on campus now, and I believe that's one of the players where you refer to as like, well, is she going to actually play, or will she end up coming off the bench, or is it one of those instances where she ends up at the program and then doesn't see a lot of the field? Her and Emma Reagan should see some minutes, I think, this season in the Big 12. So those are some on the women's side. Jumping over onto the men's side, there's a little bit more influence that I think should shine forth. Obviously, I mentioned Comcia at North Carolina. I can rattle off a few. I'm not going to rattle off too many names, but Ethan Beckford's a former TFC Academy player who should be a bit better this year for Penn State. You have some Sigma FC kids still at Akron, Marcel Zajac, Faisal Gaffer, and Ivan Nikolic, the latter being an incoming recruit. Cal Montgomery could be a standout player at Charlotte. He's a British Columbia product. And then closest to you guys up there in the northeast corner of Canada, obviously you have Syracuse with a whopping 7 players from Ontario on the roster right now. So Kamal Miller's probably their most notable. I think he's a guy that has an outside shot at getting drafted and potentially making an MLS roster next season.
Yeah, I think having grown up in Ontario, that Syracuse influence, that is kind of the big college in the States that a lot of people gravitate to, that in Michigan, but for obvious reasons, for closeness as well. Anyway, Travis, for final question, we'll wrap after this. Forget nationalities, forget passports. There probably is, at any given year, 3 or 4 players on the men's side that have potential to make an impact in Major League Soccer. Can you sort of identify who you think most likely is to make a breakthrough in the near future?
Yeah, so I think that Indiana's left back, Andrew Gutman, he's a guy that I watched a lot of last fall with I was at the College Cup, so this was last winter, whatever you want to call it. He's a guy that I thought should have turned pro. He could probably play as an outside back right away. The forward at SMU, Garrett McLaughlin, another kid, they signed 6 foreign players to the Generation Adidas, a lot of them attacking guys, and I'm like, kid must not have a good enough agent or want to go to MLS, because he's somebody I thought that could also have been in contention for that. Benji Michel, forward at Portland, another kid that with a good season, 10, 15 goals. You're looking at a guy who's likely going to be part of a Generation Adidas conversation if the Generation Adidas program still exists. Who the heck knows what MLS is going to do then tomorrow? So those are a handful of guys. Siad Haji is a sort of an under the radar, the Virginia Commonwealth, which is a school in Richmond, Virginia, a guy that if you want to look at coming, I guess, more or less from nowhere to making an impact, he's a guy that you watch him and you think there's something special there, and I think he could do something in MLS if he's given the chance and given the proper run. So I can rattle off a few more names, but there's not a huge amount of high-end talent you're looking at, mostly underclassmen that you hope do well and come good. So I think that if you want to assess it from a talent perspective, it's probably no different than the past few seasons where there's a guy here and there that could probably, in the right spot, come in and get some run. And then for the most part, you're looking at roster fillers and USL guys.
Travis, tell the listeners how they can follow your work, about Top Drawer and stuff like that.
Yeah, follow TopDrawerSoccer.com is the website. Follow us on Twitter at TopDrawerSoccer, or me on Twitter at Travis M. Clark.
All right, we'll check in later on or towards the College Cup. Thanks as always for your time.
No problem. Have a good day, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, interesting aspect that there's a lot of Canadians still in NCAA.
Yeah, there are for sure. There's also a lot of Canadians, obviously, in U Sport, which does kick off this weekend. If you're in the area, you can, or anywhere around the country, just check the usport.ca to check their lineup there. It's worthwhile watching there, as we said. And if you haven't listened to our Two Solitudes Patreon-only interview with Carm last week, the York University master coach, I encourage you to give us those $2 and go listen to it, because it's one of the best interviews we've done in a while. I think really informative interview, Kevin. So yeah, college soccer, as I said to Travis, I'm done with the arguments. I think I think that I've won the argument, not won it in the sense that Travis was ever wrong, but in the sense that the rest of the world has come around to my thinking on the draft. Because back in 2010 or so, when I was having this discussion, everyone was like, no, this is a big event, and now everyone kind of makes fun of it in the same way. And I think that that's the unfortunate part, is, as I said to Travis in the interview, these college kids they're good athletes. It's worthwhile watching. It's entertaining soccer onto its own right. Don't get caught up into what's going to happen at the pro level. 4 or 5 of them might go pro and have a good career. The rest of them, this is going to be the pinnacle of their existence. And so, trouncing them out on a stage and putting a scarf around them for a marketing photo op, I have an issue with that.
There's one thing that I wanted to ask Travis, but I didn't get a chance to, and I'm going to ask you, Duane. There's now a plethora of private combine that are held in the beginning of spring and the summer, where aspiring soccer players that maybe want to have a college career in the United States or in Canada pay a fee to appear at that combine. Practice, show, play combine games. It's just like a normal combine, but it's a for-profit combine. And then some of them do get a scholarship, or at least a chance to play. I'm wondering, what is your thought on those private combines?
The same thought as I have in many ways with the big international clubs that come over and set up their quote-unquote academies, is that if these combines are doing this in the right way and they are legitimately helping kids, and I'd have to look at them one by one to make that determination, then I suppose I don't have too much of a problem. There are costs that need to be covered, but I do think that anytime you're in a for-profit sort of scenario, when you're talking about athletics, you run the risk of taking advantage of people's dreams, and I have an issue with that. So if these combines are legitimately helping kids get scholarships, then great. And if the cost involved is there to cover the costs of having the combine, then okay, I get that. But if you're legitimately just, like if I showed up and said, I'm going to go back to college and I want to know if a college coach is interested in a middle-aged, out of shape dude. Well, I'm not in bad shape right now, but for that level I am, and they're going to take my money because whatever. That's an extreme exaggeration, but any kid that's 18 that clearly doesn't have the talent, I think that it's imperative upon those combines to look at them and go, well, I'm sorry, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm not going to take your money because it would be unethical of me to do so, because you're really not an NCAA 1A guy, right? That's my issue with them. Yeah,
I guess I have to agree with that aspect. And me, it's more maybe sometimes when you give the impression to a player that just come, who knows, and dreams are always possible and anything is possible, and then there's a very few amounts. I don't have one combine in particular. There's one that happens here in Montreal. It's the Ribeiro Mugen combine, and it has a good track record of at least finding teams for players in the NCAA. It's not always a scholarship, but sometimes it's NCAA 2 and 2As and 3, but they're finding places for players to play, and then it's all on the players. So no, it's interesting, and it's going to happen more and more where people think they have contacts and they organize a combine and they call a few scouts and the scouts come in. And so we'll see down the road if there's more of those combines and the track records that they do have versus NCAA teams. As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We wanted to talk about the Nations League and the Women's National Team of Canada. I guess we're going to talk about it tomorrow because we're out of time for today. As always, you can follow the show at Soccer Today SPN and find the podcast versions of all our shows at Sports Podcasting Network and anywhere you get your podcast. As always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.